Yakuza 5 is big. Huge, colossal, grandiose, towering, pretty stonking large. 5 playable characters, each with their own combat styles and gameplay shifting side stories. 5 cities, each with their own stores and mini-games. 500 quid on Patreon. And we're already way beyond the next few stretch goals. I'll get to them, don't worry. But Yakuza 5 is a beast. It had a 2-year development time in which they aimed to both double the content and write a thematically stronger story. The game came out in 2012 and was made to be a snapshot of a country and its culture. People petitioned for their cities to be included in its gargantuan narrative, which spread across the nation. This game was big in so many ways. You know what else was big? The wait. It was worse in the West. After 4 and Dead Souls didn't make much of an impact, localization ceased. The series was dead outside of Asia, save for a cult fandom in the West importing copies. Most of us in the West wouldn't see it until 2015 with a digital-only PS3 release. Sega was testing the waters, seeing if there was much of a fan base left to serve. And well, it did good enough to get us Yakuza 0, where a newcomer boom guaranteed the series would continue to see its way over to us. When it did come out, I had to replace my hard drive to even install the thing. The game was demonstrating its sheer girth before I even got to play it, trading one Tokyo jungle for another. From there, being in university at the time, having coursework and other business to attend to, it took me well over a year to actually muddle my way through Yakuza 5, which only inflated how big the game felt. I remember a friend coming over at a few points throughout the year and I'd put the game on while we talked. He'd look at the screen and say, "You're still in this damn city," as I trudged my way through snowy Tsukimino. When I got to the end, so long after I started, my memories of the early story were hazy or just gone. There was so little I could recall, which frayed an ending that may have been trying to intertwine so many narrative threads experienced over many hours, many months earlier. In the years since, 5 has become an assortment of half-remembered scenes, made up mostly of people saying the word dreams 10 times a minute before being sent to the bloody land of Nod. That attempt at a stronger theme was weakly remembered as little more than a repeated statement of intent. It wasn't a thought, it was a word. This video will have spoilers, and yes, I'm aware it's long. I said at the end of Yakuza 4 I'll make this one shorter, and as I sit down to write, I doubt I'll keep that promise, and well, I'm beyond the point of caring whether or not I do. These videos are a compendium, an exploration, a journey, and an analysis of a series that I adore. Yakuza 5 is big, and we're going to go through it, bit by bit. If you can't watch this in one sitting, I understand. That's what chapters are for, if YouTube hasn't culled that very nice feature when you're watching this. I hope you enjoy the video, sit back and relax. We do actually have install screens for a little bit longer. No absurd English lyrics this time, sadly. Just an introduction to our playable lineup with a fan translation. There's a lot more motion and really nice transitions between the characters. The main menu also shows a step up in presentation, setting a mood for the story to follow. Kiryu in unfamiliar threads, walking away from Kamurocho. Something's wrong here. The simplicity of previous menus honestly surprised me going back. They are downright utilitarian, but the sooner you can get people's minds going like this menu does, the better. So, let's see what's up. It turns out Kiryu has walked quite a ways. Our story opens in December 2012, not in Kamurocho but Nagasugai, Fukuoka, based on the red light district of Nakasu. Yakuza just naturally gravitate towards such pleasure centers. Civilians stay clear of a standoff between foot soldiers. A car pulls up alongside the Tojo. Inside is Daigo, having just finished his talk with Tadashi Madarame, head of the local Yamagasa family. And it seems things have gone well.
3万の組員を束ねるあなたが500に満たない兵隊しか持たない私に従うと。
五分の杯というものだと。
His humility and trust have impressed the man, and so the troops are dismissed for the evening by Tojo Chief of Headquarters Minoru Aoyama, and Yahata family captain, Yahata. Aoyama is a little confused as to why the hotel meeting was cancelled for this. Daigo says there's always risk, but the Yamagasa aren't so stupid they'd try anything against him. Aoyama then tries to usher his boss back to the hotel for the evening, but Daigo wanders off, saying he needs some time to himself. Aoyama summons Morinaga and Aizawa to keep track of the chairman. He heads to a taxi stand and picks a specific cab.
乗せてくれないか?
And wouldn't you know who's driving it? Man, Daigo's making trouble for Kiryu in record time. With such efficiency, it's only fair he gets a fare. Kiryu's attempts to move him along fall flat, and so the two take off, heading nowhere in particular.
適当でいい。
Daigo, seeing that his driver is under the name Taichi Suzuki, and no, I'm not going to do that joke for an entire fifth of the runtime, starts a one-sided conversation layered in doublespeak, talking about how the Tojo's fortunes have shifted since March 2010, now 30,000 men strong with money troubles sorted thanks to a business alliance with none other than the Omi. However, this deal and their chairman are not much longer for this world. The man is terminally ill, and none of his likely successors like the Tojo.
候補は3人。腕一本でのし上がった副社長に大阪の財界を仕切る専務、そして社長の秘蔵っ子の取締役。タイプは違えど皆さん社長になる実力を持った方々です。
Daigo knows that when any of them take power, the agreement folds, and war is likely to follow. In preparation for this, Daigo and the Tojo top brass have spread across the country, forming alliances, so that when the time comes, they'll have plenty of allies. This is all a very exciting setup for a crime thriller. So Kiryu, what's your response? Well, he wants nothing to do with it. The reins of the Tojo that he foisted on Daigo are his and his alone. Yakuza 5 does a lot to redeem Daigo in my eyes. I've cracked a lot of jokes about his less than stellar leadership, and that's going to continue. But in this scene...
いい加減俺も自分の足で歩けるようにならないとダメだってことか。これでも俺なりに精一杯茨の道を歩いてるつもりなんですよ。4代目。
He's winning some respect. The game isn't done raising questions and painfully rubbing Kiryu's past in his face. As he gets some grub, we see Haruka being interviewed on TV. Two other drivers talk about how scummy the idol business is, a place where parents throw their kids to the wolves, hoping they'll achieve dreams they never could. All Kiryu can do is storm off. This gives a pretty solid idea about what has happened, but why and how? The opening of Yakuza 5 is slow, downbeat, atmospherically heavy, and really intriguing. 4 began in a Tokyo we know with faces we don't. Whatever disconnection is felt quickly dissipates because Akiyama brings us into his Kamurocho and reminded us that Kiryu's influence is still felt. This opening instead weaponizes disconnect. Kiryu's life is a haze and we're led to wonder how he got here, and it's easy to imagine he's asking himself much the same. And when confronted with his past, he shows it the door. And this conflict runs deep. It hits you with how uncomfortably different everything is. So many shocking swerves back to back. Kiryu is not only not acting like himself, he isn't himself. He's lost his kids. He's miles from either place he could call home. Haruka's on TV, and Daigo isn't fucking everything up. It doesn't take a detective to see that things are wrong. Back at Kiryu's workplace, Nagasugai Taxi, he's about to turn in for the night but has one last piece of business to attend to. He's summoned by his boss Nakajima overtaking a queue-jumping customer. Another firm had complaints and he's about to go apologise on our behalf, but Kiryu insists he should be the one to do it. So we're told to head down to Tenjin Transportation. Outside, Kiryu figures he can't turn up empty-handed, and at the gates he hears a couple of tourists talking souvenirs, saying Fukuoka is well known for mentaiko. So, that's a gift sorted. Yakuza 5 leans into the virtual tourism aspect with a much greater focus and scale. It introduces 3 new cities, Fukuoka, Sapporo, and Nagoya, which join the returning Osaka and Tokyo. While each of them are less interesting in layout than Kamurocho, they each have a unique visual identity and are very pleasant to soak in. Though, speaking of soak, sadly no rain. The cities are more densely populated than before. I don't mean there's more people, I mean they're really heavy. I love and loathe this. Plus, it's plainer than ever to see how the game tries to populate its streets, and the results are messy. What it tries to do is place a lot of people around corners so they'll wander out and fill the space. What tends to happen is they get stage fright, miss their cue, and now we have a 30-man mosh pit to muddle through. And since they're more tangible, you can't glide through them as easily, so we wind up with a lot more congestion. It's annoying, but also kind of funny. I never figured I'd get stuck in foot traffic. I have no idea why so many people are hanging out in this pocket of the Camaro Theatre cut-through, but man, this stairway is bumping. I have never knocked so many people flat. While the locations are lovingly rendered, food is the real star of the show. Eateries have always been a big part of the Yakuza experience, and with so much more ground to cover, 5 puts dining front and center. Local delicacies are often the subject of substories. There's a whole new power-up system based around dining, and the game makes grub a focal point from very early on in the story. One of the earliest conversations Kiryu has is his boss being able to tell where he's from based on how he likes his broth base. Yakuza 5 is many things, and oddest amongst them is being a celebration of food. In each city, we also find a man from the local tourism board. He recruits us to go and snap 5 landmarks. This is a great way to get the player to really look at each city, not just as the means to connect objectives and activities, but as an actual space. This game is about 5 nightlife hotspots, but a lot of effort has gone into making each of them feel distinct, and it's a great effort. This tourism angle also helps Kiryu. We're building familiarity with the place the same way he is. He's framed as a tourist along with us. Each of the characters in Yakuza 5 have a similar disconnection with their hub, a reason they're there even though it isn't truly their home. And in Kiryu's case, it does sit a little awkwardly with the fact that this game is also trying to make us love these locales while he'd sooner be elsewhere. Besides that, I do adore that when we finally make it to Kamurocho, Tourism Board Man asks us not to get the same old spots, so we hand him such in-the-know sights as the gate, the Millennium Tower, the hills. Yeah, it's a real deep dive. Why not show him the absurdly large sewers if we want to impress? Fishing's good down here. Give him Purgatory and have Kage kill us. I mean, oh well, he's happy, so all's good, I guess. Getting a good gift is optional, and in New Game Plus I almost started blasting. But I let Tenjin get off easy. I don't want to make the boss's life harder by ending this guy's. So apology accepted, and banger news, it's payday, and Nakajima wants Suzuki to join him for a night out. Suzuki just has a little errand to run first. Kiryu is anonymously sending money to the orphanage, which further begs the question of why he isn't there. After that, he joins Nakajima for a night on the town. As we booze and brawl our way across Nagasugai, we get the story of how these men met. Nakajima found Suzuki on the bad end of a beating trying to defend a woman. New in town, lost, and without a job, the old cabbie sympathized. Nakajima has had a rough go of life himself, and formed Nagasu Taxi to be a place for good people dealt a bad hand. It's there Suzuki was welcomed and has remained since.
俺も昔良かれと思ってやったことが原因で多くの大切なもんば失ってしもうたことがあってね。でも俺は信じとう。不器用で一直線な男ほど仲間を裏切らん。
Nakajima is hands down the best boss Kiryu has ever had, and this kindness kills Kiryu a little, since he can only repay this man's generosity with dishonesty, keeping his true identity from the company for their benefit. Kiryu has always been a man of few words, but he's always been able to be honest with those around him. He's not a man of guile, and while he is trying to make the most of his new life, it's a life where he works to keep everyone at arm's length, and the nicer they are, the more painful that is. Nakajima knows there's more to Taichi Suzuki than meets the eye, but he lets him live the lie because he trusts that there's still a good man behind a very poorly worn mask. With their touchy-feely talk out of the way, Nakajima tells Kiryu rumors are circulating around the firm that he swings a certain way. So with that, he's strong-armed into ending the night at Hostess Cabaret Olivier. Upon learning what the place is, he hesitates. But by now, Nakajima is too drunk and belligerent to be talked down. He demands their number one girl and blusters his way in. When Mayumi turns up, her and Kiryu share a look before she gets to work entertaining Nakajima. All Kiryu can do is sip his drink and say as little as possible. Luckily, 2 sloshed goons are there to do all the talking.
今すぐ福岡から追い出しゃよかっただけの話だろうが!
The Tojo's visit has rubbed the lower rungs of the Yamagasa the wrong way, and these punks don't like having their lower rungs rubbed wrongly. They make a scene, berate the staff, and when Bossman heads over to have a word,
他ん客のことも考えろ。
Communications break down.
下っ端がこうも安易に仇に手かけるなんて。
貴さん、誰やこれ。
なるほど。俺が誰だか知らないようだな。
知るかボケ。
そうか。おかげで気が楽になった。
If that makes it easier, why did they beat us, Kiryu? Yakuza 5 marks another engine change. Dead Souls, the zombie spin-off, was actually titled Of the End in Japan, since it was seen as closing the era of Kenzan, 3, 4, and itself. That's why we're seeing sleeker menus, more tangible crowds, and further refined combat to go along with it. The changes are subtle, but they do add up. For starters, characters feel a smidgen heavier. Combos no longer feel like a string of individual attack animations, but a series of flowing interconnected strikes, giving each greater heft and momentum. It took me a moment to get used to coming off of 4. These two incredibly easy goons genuinely caught me off guard. And yeah, I game overed here. I guess they got boss fight music for a reason, but still pretty embarrassing. But within short order, it feels natural, and it's hard to go back after this. Frame stop has been added on big knockout strikes, instantly letting the player know to move on to another opponent. The difference a single stop frame can make is staggering. It adds a ton of impact to blows, while serving as a handy little indicator for the player. They've added a wall toss, where in certain situations, instead of a standard throw, characters will instead send bastards barreling into barriers, where you can do a really weak follow-up. I don't care for this addition much, it mostly just got in the way of what I wanted to do, which is to throw a guy into more guys. But speaking of throws, I'm not sure this is meant to work. Your ability to turn when tossing is much greater, which can wind up looking crazy, but it does make a ton of mid-combo throws a lot more viable and useful in the same way turn hitting was earlier in the series. When it comes to this spinning, I'm a fan. Along with all this are some small quality of life improvements. A button to switch grapple positions has been added, which helps with some heat moves. On the opposite end of the spectrum, there is a heat suppression button, meaning you can throw out heavy attacks without worrying whether you'll spend meter. The ability to pump the brakes is fantastic, and I can't believe it took this long to come around. There have been so many times earlier in the series when I wanted to conserve heat, where I'd step on eggshells to hold on to a move. This fixes that. I can keep cutting loose. So this is all a few steps forward, but there is one weird step back. Climax heat moves are a rather shallow addition that makes sure the issue still exists. Over multiple fights, you'll fill up one extra bar, and with it, you can do a highly damaging climax heat attack. Each character has 3 of these moves, but the one each of them starts with will have a pretty universal setup. The system does what it sets out to do, which is to give you a stronger, slower building heat move, but I hate what it does to the flow of combat. If I have one stored and want to save it for a boss, I now have to be very careful and dance around it. It weighs down on moment-to-moment decision making and limits how I can fight for fear of accidentally setting the thing off. These moves have to be able to be triggered in a boss fight, so as stated, their trigger is simple, almost universal, and for that reason I wish they weren't just tied to hitting the heat action button the same as any other heat move, since I wasted these more often than not and their build up is so slow that I can't really plan around them. That is one complaint though, and for the most part, after adjusting to it, the combat is snappy and more cathartic than ever. Kiryu's moveset hasn't seen much expansion, but he has improved his dropkick and he is clearly much, much angrier than before. Jesus Christ, Kiryu. So, the goons are got, and Kiryu hands the victory to Nakajima.
中島社長が倒したんじゃないですか。
こんなこと。
Oh, I love that guy. Outside, the two part ways, and it seems Kiryu's long, tiring evening is coming to a close. The additions to street fighting are nice and small. They can fit in your pockets. Goons can now pull out cell phones to call in backup, and with this there are new heat actions to shut them down and spare their friends the pain. The enemies have another new bit of tech, the ability to run away. As their numbers dwindle, further defeats and big heat moves will send some of them packing. I'm proud, they finally realize they can run. Overall, I'm fond of these additions. They give the fights a bit more dynamism. Alongside this is a new diversion that makes street battles feel a little bit more meaningful, and that is the Victory Road Tournament. All across Japan, this mysterious yet somehow familiar gentleman is seeking out the toughest fighters, gathering them for a showdown in Tokyo's famed pleasure district. Hopefuls are roaming the streets to provide, well, really easy battles still, but after a few run-ins you'll get a boss fight or two for each character. Again, I do wish these were just a mite tougher, and part of me wishes that all the Victory Road bosses roam the map rather than just the last one. The boss battles wait in place and they're flagged up. Admittedly more convenient, but it robs the Victory Road of some energy. It's a subplot that runs through the whole game and it builds excitement for the Colosseum, making it feel like we're on the cusp of something big, that this is a nationwide event. Okay, that's done. Kiryu can surely head to bed now, right? No. We're stopped by a dashing young lad. His name is Sosuke Komaki. Having seen us wallop some goons earlier tonight, he takes Kiryu aside and says he sensed that the man was holding something back. Sosuke here wants a fight, and he wants us to give it our all. This unlocks Dragon Spirit, Kiryu's big new ability. Instead of a heat move, Kiryu can become incredibly pissed off. Attacks will bounce right off him and he'll instant shift to the nearest unfortunate soul and destroy them. It's unwieldy, uncontrollable, sort of jank, and a lot of fun. It's a great side option to heat moves. It's fantastic against crowds, but bosses will shut it down pretty quickly. Sosuke then goes on to reintroduce many of Komaki's moves that Kiryu has forgotten all over again, including the dreaded Tiger Drop. Each character gets a master or two, each with a unique storyline and occasional requirements. We'll cover them as we get to each city. Sosuke in his youth was kept away from his grandfather, but sought the old master out when he was bullied at school. After training under him, Sosuke wanted to go and seek out his bullies, but the elder Komaki told him not to. This has never sat right with Sosuke, who thinks it's a waste to sit in a dojo doing nothing but sparring. He believes that strength is meant to be used. He's blunt and rude and egotistical. But through talking with Kiryu and accidentally having his lack of success with women rubbed in his face, he starts to confront his ego, realize how stupid he's acting, and actually consider his grandfather's words, even if he doesn't quite get them yet. This is another frustration he has to grapple with. Understanding his grandfather's words aren't wrong, but being unable to comprehend why. That's his rather low unique requirement besides beating his increasingly difficult fights. His ego is brittle, so occasionally you'll have to go and find him about town and coax him back. The relationship begins with Sosuke noticing Kiryu is rusty and wanting to get him back up to speed, pretty much solely for his own gratification and wanting to fight someone he can clearly see as a fellow Komaki-style practitioner. It ends when Kiryu, now limbered up, notices that Sosuke isn't at his full potential either. He's effective, but his martial arts is little more than violence, it lacks grace and control. Which is a pretty good explanation of why the first thing we get from Sosuke is Dragon Spirit, which is effective but directionless rage. Useful for overcoming most, but ineffectual against a skilled fighter. And I do love that by this point, Kiryu is not above babying the guy, telling him his tough guy act is paper thin, and Sosuke will never improve if he doesn't actually confront himself. After one last strop, Sosuke swallows his pride, and then spits it back up again when asking Kiryu for help paying his way back to Tokyo. But you'll want to pony up the dough. It's pretty important for about 100 in-game hours from now. And this was a fun little story. It's strange that at this point, the most human connection Kiryu has formed has been with the grandson of an old hobo who taught Kiryu how to break the game he's in. But I'll take it. So now, at long last, can Kiryu head home? He's got work in the morning. Okay, alright. No interruptions so far. All clear. He's at the door. And he's safe. So, now with some time to himself, Kiryu indulges in his favourite hobby, staring at a wall and smoking himself to death. Daigo's words linger in his mind.
茨の道を歩いているつもりなんですよ。読んだよね。
But he's knocked out of his reverie.
ただいま。ただいま。
ああ。おかえり。
The next morning, Kiryu and number one hostess and housemate Mayumi have a chat. She's the one Kiryu helped all those months ago, and their relationship is strange. Kiryu is keeping a distance that Mayumi is trying to bridge, undeterred by Kiryu's polite, consistent pushing away.
今日は新しいやつ着てってね。
そういうことはやらなくていいっていつも言ってんだろ。
私がやりたくてやってるんだし、いいじゃない。
身の回りのことは自分でする。勝手なことはしないでくれ。
もう、相変わらず釣れない人ね。
This is the only person Kiryu has let in to any extent, besides Sosuke. He doesn't hide his ink from her, but in being closer, she's so much further away. I love the music choice for this scene. It gives the whole thing an oppressive air. There's ground that neither is willing to give, questions neither are ready to ask, an uncomfortable dishonesty that both seem aware of. Anyway, off to work. Unlike Kiryu with his stellar stamina, Yakuza 5 is going to have a lot of pacing problems as we go along. Like Yakuza 4, each character has a unique activity, but 5 expands these into entire side stories with new gameplay systems and self-contained plotlines. So Kiryu doesn't get to walk into work without first drawing the ire of the devil killers, as some of the creeps we beat up last night want revenge on Kiryu and drag their gangster buddy into the mix. All the momentum of that intro with questions raised and tone set, that's about to be put on hold for an hour to set up an entirely different story and give tutorials on a new set of mechanics. Now, this would have to go somewhere in the game, and it's probably best to get it out of the way now. We're going to see this happen several more times over the course of the game, and this is probably the second worst instance of it, and it's not that bad. Inside the Nagasugai taxi office, no one questions why they heard bones breaking outside. Before we can start work for the day, Kiryu's senior at the company, Wada, asks if he can get a ride home. Suzuki obliges, and Nakajima encourages Wada to give the newbie some tips. We also meet the young, by-the-books and boring Muramatsu, and Hirakawa. Wada takes us on a lap of Nagasugai, and Kiryu is briefed on how he should drive for passengers. As soon as Wada is dropped off, an actual client is picked up. This guy tries to chat with Kiryu, and when he can't keep the conversation going, the guy basically teaches Kiryu how to do small talk, and tells us that people in these parts like their drivers chatty. Being a Londoner, I can't relate, but I can suggest exporting every cabbie I've ever met. Kiryu, mate, you gave Daigo bad service. The two are interrupted when the car is rear-ended by a devil killer. They used to only challenge other racers, but they're now stooping so low as to harass civilians. So our passenger, who turns out to work for the police, encourages Kiryu to take up the challenge. So this happens. The guy we beat turns out to be the guy we beat, so he beats it. The cop, who by the way is named Furumichi, treats Kiryu to a meal and asks him to take on the rest of the devil killers. A cop can't be seen street racing since it would hurt their image, but Kiryu might be a way to infiltrate and take down the gang. There is some apprehension, but when he's told about the potential harm the devil killers might do, he agrees to give it a go. Back at the office, we tell Nakajima about our run-in. Well, there's obviously a story there. He gives Kiryu the go-ahead and says he'll contact Furumichi himself, but something here is digging at him. And so with that out of the way, we can get back to the other crime drama, or we can spend 5 hours doing this, and this, and this. So let's get to work. Whoa, slow down. We're not there yet. You've got to learn the rules of the road before you can break them. The taxi side story doesn't have an ongoing narrative, with each mission being its own vignette. Kiryu talks to his passenger, and through his words and more importantly, exceptional driving, he helps them a little. It's a sub-story in motion. The gameplay is mundane in a way that's really enjoyable. You have to obey traffic laws, use your indicators, and watch out for people who have it coming. all the while making conversation. There's a lot jockeying for your attention, and it does come together into something genuinely engaging. Plus the music is chill in a weirdly classically Sega Dreamcast-y way. I love it. It's less Crazy Taxi and more chatty cabbie. It is sort of limited by the simplicity of the Nagasugai map leading to a lot of repetition, and the aforementioned seemingly suicidal shitheads who dive into the road, and I get penalised for giving them what they want. This is a service job, and my bumper is a valuable service. This can get pretty grating when it does a tailing mission, but for the most part, all things chill. Before long, the game drops the whole driving bit, and it becomes an hour of text boxing. It is a little disappointing. Kiryu giving sagely advice is fun and this is the perfect setup for it, but several of these back-to-back all put at the end, and you start wishing they scaled the quantity of content back a little to give us more regular taxi gigs, or maybe intersperse these with the driving jobs. It runs out of gas way too fast and then just sputters on for many meandering miles. Are you guys hearing that? Okay, so what we're all here for. Wild speed. Nagoshi got his start at Sega in racing games, and yeah, he's got a good track record. This obviously can't go all in on driving mechanics, but for a side mode that is far more styled at substance, has just one track with some course variation, and takes 2 hours to clean out, it's pretty damn fun. The driving model is arcadey and simplistic. This is about doing sick drifts and hitting boost. Parts of the circuit also have heat actions that can only be triggered once per race. You've got to pick your moments to make them most effective, either to build a stronger lead or close a gap. They're pretty entertaining to boot. Between each race, you can customize your taxi's look and stats. This is more important than your actual driving ability. The AI is a rubber band, and what's really important is snapping it. Only the optional final challenge race tasks you with both optimizing the car to keep up and maintaining a slim lead through constant drifting and smart use of boost. Most of the racing is more spectacle than skill, but it's pretty good spectacle. Also, fucking baller soundtrack. This was my second run-in with Eurobeat after running in the 90s on YTMND, and this time it stuck with me. I also do love the little saga of Kiryu versus the Devil Killers, though little might be underselling it. This side story not only features its own cast, it truly spends its time exploring and developing them. Kiryu, meanwhile, fills the role of a street racer with hilarious ease. Cool and collected, has an inner intensity, and most importantly, very little regard for his own well-being. He is ready-made for this. While beating them, Kiryu impresses a young devil killer hopeful named Kiyakawa, who instead joins Nagasu Taxi. He acts as our exposition for the devil killer's 4 kings, while in turn Kiryu acts as his senpai at the company. They're a lively bunch. Speaking of lively, we're challenged by Muramatsu. He has hated this whole situation from the get-go. We learn he was an F1 hopeful, but couldn't afford to keep chasing the dream, oh hey, there's that word, and had to pack it in. He hates street racers more than anything for making a mockery of proper racing, and he thinks Kiryu is just doing this for the glory. After a street race, he swallows his pride and admits he just hated us getting an attention that life has denied him, and endeavours to support our struggle. Games just exist in this wonderful reality where we can win any argument by just being better at stuff. I love it. Muramatsu also drops the bomb that Nakajima used to be a street racer, which definitely throws Kiryu for a loop. As we keep giving the Devil Killers the 1-2 punch, winning a race and then punching them, one eventually confesses that Nakajima was the original Devil Killer. When confronted, he finally sheds some light on his past. 20 years back, the Devil Killers were nothing more than him and a bunch of gearhead friends, Wada amongst them, and Nakajima was the fastest of the lot. For them, safety was always top priority. They made certain they weren't endangering anyone else, and they raced purely for the love of speed. Nakajima hates that now it's all done on public highways and races are heavily gambled on. When Kiryu asks why Nakajima left the life, Wada has to step in and say that's a story best left in the past. Speaking of the past, the new leader of the Devil Killers has no respect for it. He despises the hobbyist nature of the group's founding, but takes great pleasure and profit in profiting from it. This is the root of the story here, people corrupting another's dream for their own selfish end. They've even turned Kiryu's confrontation with the boss into a publicity stunt, streaming it online and running the betting pool, all with hopes of a big payday. with an agreement the group will disband if Kiryu wins the race. So, we crush them once, and then once more as they try to renege on the deal. It's still not over, as Onisaka turns up to keep the pedal to the metal, and with a name like that, you know we're dealing with a real speed demon. 20 years ago, this man was meant to race Nakajima. He had been out of town training for the race for a year, but he returned to Fukuoka to find his opponent had disappeared, and he's carried a grudge ever since. We talked to the boss about this, and it leads to Nakajima revealing that his wife was put into a coma after a car accident. Nakajima didn't have it in him to be mad. It was a street racer that hit them, forcing him to realize the danger that he was always posing to others no matter how hard he tried. He and Wada left the scene, and without his direction the Devil Killers began to morph into the soulless entity we just put to rest. Nakajima loved nothing more than taking his wife out on rides, and with no skills besides driving, he took up work as a cabbie in the hopes that when she wakes up he could drive her around again, which sadly didn't come to pass. To Onisaka's credit, he understands that Nakajima isn't a man to leave without good reason, but he's been stuck waiting a long time to prove himself. Kiryu is now the man who can step in and try and help him move on by doing sick drifts. This is Kiryu being able to pay Nakajima back for the kindness he showed him, by moving that kindness onto Onisaka, who shouldn't have to live life chained to a decades-old grudge match. Kiryu triumphs, Nakajima and Onisaka bury the hatchet, and it turns out Furumichi was another devil killer. So the original gang are reunited 20 years on, so that they may properly say goodbye to it all. Optional race of a traffic cop unlocked, but Nakajima remains unchallengeable because Yakuza respects its characters. Also, we raced Wada in there somewhere. So this is really good stuff. It's its own little chronicle, treated with near as much weight, if not production value, as the main story. Only it's about street racing. The core theme of dreams is present and utilised in a unique way. I went through it mostly beat for beat to show that yes, this is a story. It's also fun to play and doesn't outstay its welcome. It's perhaps the first sign that Yakuza 5 might be one of the most absurdly stuffed experiences you'll ever get, when a purely optional tale has this much love, attention, and thematic resonance. I've got to ask, does anyone remember what's going on in the story? I mean, the story. Kiryu's turning in after his longest day of work in Aizawa. How you been? I'm surprised I remember your name. More so Morinaga. The two take Kiryu aside.
俺に聞きたいことってのは
堂島会長の行方です。
行方?
Daigo has disappeared, and his last known location was the taxi of Taichi Suzuki, and they're very surprised to learn just who that is.
ついさっきまでね。
Throughout this part, Kiryu rejects his identity as the fourth chairman, but the Yakuza world and Kiryu's own inability to truly walk away means he'll always come back. It still affects him, whether or not he likes it. Still, Kiryu isn't there yet. He says he doesn't know where Daigo has Daigone and tries to go. This sets off Aizawa, revealing he's passionate to a fault.
あるいは最悪な場合。
Couldn't have been an accident. I don't remember hitting him. Aizawa does try and get Kiryu to talk, disgusted by his disregard for the clan, claiming that Daigo was always telling stories of the legendary fourth chairman. Kiryu's name still has strength amongst the Tojo. Little does he know that's not praise the man wants, as he continues to insist that he's just a taxi driver.
その手を離せ。離せと言ってるだろ。
Morinaga steps in and winds up planting an idea in Kiryu's head. He asks if he really is just Taichi Suzuki. When Taichi agrees, Morinaga follows that since he's just a civilian, they'll simply beat answers out of him.
仇に手を出すってのか。
間違いは承知の上。しかし今一刻を争うとき、綺麗事を言ってられる状況じゃありません。
This scene's pretty cool. We're now kicking off the real mystery, Daigo's disappearance. If you've done all the taxi stuff, it feels oddly natural to readjust to the main story with a scene that's only mildly more polished in presentation. That said, for a lot of Kiryu's part from now on, it really is just men standing around in drab locales, talking back and forth at each other and speculating for extended periods. It's a lot less dynamic and exciting than how previous games have done it, though part of that may be reflecting that Kiryu has left a lot of himself behind and is fighting a losing battle to keep it that way. I say that because later parts can be a lot more dynamic and interestingly staged. Meanwhile, Kiryu's part has something of an emptiness about it.
待ってください。4代目。
俺が知っていることは全て話した。 それだけは本当だ。この後どうするかはお前たちの仕事だ。
The next day, Kiryu drives a couple of Omi men to the station. They reiterate everything Daigo said from the Omi perspective with a smidgen less doublespeak and, well, far less interesting subtext, as Kiryu gets these two Yakuza to spill a ton of stuff by just asking leading questions and spilling that Daigo is missing. I mean, damn, Furumichi really taught you how to keep the conversation going, huh, Taichi? You bloody rat. Hang on, wait, when did the Omi get here? After work, Kiryu sees the two bodyguards still trying to find leads, and the Yamagasa are not happy to have this mess on their doorstep. Back at home, Kiryu and Mayumi talk. After Kiryu once again rejects her advances, the conversation turns to the touchy topic of family. This chapter began with a flashback to Kiryu leaving the orphanage, which I'll get more into later when we have enough context to discuss the meatier themes. But suffice to say, this is weighing on Kiryu's mind right now. He has left behind everything he cares about and just asked Mayumi to leave as well. By now, there's a strong sense that Kiryu just wants to be put in a box where no one could really ever get close to him again, if only because he believes everyone he comes into contact with suffers for it. Kiryu's coldness steadily reveals itself to be his idea of protecting others. That's when Aizawa drags in a beaten and bloodied Morinaga. At the waterfront, Kiryu is told what happened. The two were ambushed by Yamagasa men, and they're not alone. Ever since the meet between Daigo and Madarame, Tojo soldiers are getting jumped left and right. The tricky thing is they can't report this or ask for help. Patriarch Aoyama, the chief of headquarters, is an incredibly strict figure. He ruthlessly punishes mistakes, culls any family not pulling their weight regardless of age or prestige, and promotes go-getters no matter how junior. Kiryu says that running a Yakuza clan like a business won't work, but Aizawa points out that numbers are up and morale is high. The clan has been reinvigorated under his watchful eye. Something like the Ueno Seiwa incident would likely not even have got off the ground if Aoyama was around. One thing the game doesn't really go into is that Kamurocho Hills was finished. We'll visit it, and it's still under the Tojo umbrella, right? Did it do anything for them? Ah, never mind, it was probably all Aoyama, who, by the way, was this guy. Part of the fun of following this franchise for me has been charting how circumstances change game to game, which is usually sensible and has all these little causes and effects. Every game is self-contained, but the bigger picture is always there. Now, this isn't a big issue, it's more a nitpick, but it stands out to me. For the Hills to be little more than set dressing when it was seen as instrumental to fixing the Tojo's money troubles last game, that's a little bit weak. But hey, a downturn led to them forming their alliance with the Omi that's now being broken to kick the plot off. Kiryu, for all his attempts at disconnection, can't help but offer his perspective, that perhaps his generation are no longer necessary, that the white-collar Yakuza have completely uprooted the old soldiers. Even Mine stained himself red in wanting to shed his corporate ties, but Aoyama is nothing more than a businessman, and he'll toss out anything that doesn't meet demand. We're going to have a lot more discussion over the shifting image and demands of the Yakuza for the next two games, but for now, let's just say Aoyama may be a little bit ahead of his time. Back at the apartment, Mayumi rifles through Morinaga's jacket. The other two return, and Kiryu asks her to head home for the night. Much like Morinaga, Kiryu has opened up a little.
もう騙し合いは終わりだ。
The leading suspects are the Yamagasa, but Aizawa doubts they'd take such a risky move.
俺ら下っ端の組員とは喧嘩になるようなことはあっても、組長の客人を襲うなんてことをするでしょうか。
Their talk is interrupted by a phone call. Aoyama, who, by the way, is still this guy, has declared himself acting chairman despite Daigo being gone for a measly 2 days. The two head off for a meeting.
そうだ。桐生さんに一つ伝えておいた方が良いことが。
なんだ。
あの女性、真由美さんでしたっけ？あの女には。お気づきでしたか？それじゃ。
The next evening, Wada dumps some more of Kiryu's past on him. It's good to see you, Mac. We'll talk about Revelation when I have some free time. While out working, Kiryu is confronted by Serizawa, an Osakan detective who's been sent here to track Omi captain and chairman hopeful Watase.
昨日から東上会の堂島会長がここ福岡で行方不明になったって話じゃないですか。あなたのタクシーに乗っていたという目撃証言もあるんですよ。
知らないな。
関係ねえってことはねえだろ。てめえの古巣だろうが。よ、桐生さんよ。
And well, he doesn't care for Kiryu pretending not to know anything. Serizawa thinks that Fukuoka is going to be ground zero for a war between the clans, and he wants the Osaka PD to be the ones to stop that from happening. After a certain detective of theirs fell in love with a certain Tojo, well, they've been a laughingstock, so now they have an image to rebuild. Now there's that continuity I was talking about. Man, Sayama would be really confused if she got back now. Serizawa says Watase is here to stop the alliance. He suspects the Omi have kidnapped Daigo to stall negotiations and swing things in their favour. The detective wants us to get to Watase and talk him down before Morinaga, or well, more likely Aizawa, spark this whole powder keg. We're told the man is at Olivier, and Serizawa here will make sure the police don't bulldoze our life. So off Kiryu goes.
ほう、これはけったいな運転手さんのお出ましやな。自分らもよう顔をがんとき、これがあの伝説の男。
Watase is an interesting guy. Yes, he wants a war with the Tojo, but no, he hasn't kidnapped Daigo, a fact which Kiryu refuses to believe. Watase also has the best measure of Kiryu anyone has had so far. Watase realizes the dragon won't be swayed by simple denial. He sends his men at Kiryu to check if the man still breathes fire, and when satisfied, wants nothing more than to share a drink. I like Watase. He's confident he's going to be the next chairman, so he's focused on what comes afterwards. It turns out his sworn brother is Aoyama, no love lost between those two, but it was good for the Tojo and Omi's business alliance, just like feudal lords marrying their kids off. And it was from Aoyama that Watase learned Kiryu was in town. He claims to be here for him and nothing else. He came here to beg the man to return to the Tojo, so that when his war begins, it will be one worth fighting, because right now he thinks the Tojo weak.
せやから登場界には強くなってもらわなあかんねや。今堂島大吾が死んだら、わし以外の近江のやつでも潰すことができてまう。そないな登場界、わしは困んねや。
And it's nice to know someone has the Tojo's well-being in mind. To that end, he didn't kidnap Daigo. He doesn't want the man missing, since that leaves the Tojo rudderless, ill-fit for a fight. In the last couple of games, the reason the Omi didn't pounce on the Tojo during moments of weakness was for fear of Kiryu, and the plotters of those games tried to keep him out of the picture. In 5, Watase invites him in. He wants to be the one to finally take down the 4th chairman.
Yakuza は所詮ヤクザ。わしは今のあんたが退屈そうに見えてしゃあない。
I said that Watase has had the best measure of Kiryu. The two of them are classic Yakuza. But where Watase fails to grasp Kiryu is the reason why he fights.
俺とお前は違う。お前の極道は死に様。俺の極道は生き様だ。
どういう意味ですか？
同じ道でも死に向かって戦うのと生きるために戦うのは違うということだ。いずれわかる。
ほう、そら楽しみですわ。
It's a good speech and important for where we're going. It's worth noting that this is the most Kiryu has seemed himself so far. Watase is the first person he has had anything approaching a proper conversation with. He may be pissed at him, but this is the sort of confrontation where Kiryu is most comfortable. Instead of these two sparking a war, this scene sparks some life in Kiryu.
会長は一体誰か？
そのことで少し話しておきたいことがある。
Right now, these three believe that Aoyama tricked the Omi into coming here, putting pressure on the local Yakuza to quickly agree to an alliance. After learning what Watase wants, Kiryu is fairly sure the Omi don't have Daigo. And that just leaves one suspect.
青山組長は会長代行として斑組長との杯交渉に向かっています。
We're off to check in with the Yamagasa. And when I say check in with, I mean assault. I love that stealth breaks down the moment Kiryu encounters a door and his instincts literally kick in. And the heat moves that follow have probably soured any chance of an alliance thanks to guilt by association. The gameplay starts picking up pace with the story here. After some interruptions like having a job and the slow reintroduction of gameplay elements, we're in, busting heads and having the big speeches. Upstairs we find Madarame stabbed. Aoyama intended to trick him with a suitcase bomb, but the old man was 2 steps ahead and a few shots wide. Aoyama doesn't want an alliance, considering the Tojo above such a small backwater clan, and as long as he's chairman, what he says goes.
それじゃやっぱり堂島会長を誘拐したのはあなた。
Well, no need to jump the... oh.
何をしてるんだお前。空砲だよ。
Damn, Aoyama. Learning from the best.
それは知ってるよな、森永。
I have to guess that Yahata is the world's heaviest sleeper, because as Aoyama kicks the gun over to us and collapses in a heap, he finally arrives just in time for us to take the blame. And all we've done is give Aoyama an opening to flee. Kiryu tells Aizawa to get his Anarchy out of here, and respecting that masterful deception Aoyama put on, doesn't even try and avoid a fight. That would be rude. Let's talk about the Tiger Drop. I watched some Dante Devil 12 and Gunk Shot videos, both very good channels ran by people very, very good at Yakuza, and while there's much more variety to their vids than Tiger dropping bosses, I did start to notice how they were pulling them off. I will warn that picking up on how they did it and putting that into practice has had some repercussions. Nothing gameplay ruining, and I'm surprised it took me this long to notice, but honestly, I can be very slow on the uptake. It's all about spacing. A lot of bosses can be very easily baited into using nothing but their gap closers, moves made to punish reticence that turn out to be very, very easy to punish. While I'm nowhere near batting 100, I can now land counters so much more consistently. I had to hold myself back from baiting these. It trivialized some legend boss fights. Luckily, it never stops being satisfying to land. Still, sorry Yahata, you're getting played. By me and, well, by Aoyama. Kiryu fights his way out and makes sure to leave in style, giving the Yamagasa plenty of reason to think he's dunking on them.
Aoyama, Kisama! 山。
The next morning, Kiryu Tiger drops Mayumi's own gap closer.
誰に雇われたんだ?
Mayumi brings Kiryu to her father, Madarame.
昨晩は世話になりましたな。うちの八幡とやり合ったんでしょう。
He knew Aoyama was going to betray him thanks to a warning from none other than Daigo. It turns out the young chairman had long suspected their lives were in danger. Whoever arranged their meeting placed them in an obvious killing field, so Daigo switched the meeting and asked Madarame to pretend he requested the change. I gotta give it to Daigo, he's way more charismatic than I've given him credit for. He didn't get Madarame to agree to an alliance, he got him to agree to be bait on the hook, to potentially look guilty of kidnapping the Tojo's chairman, all in a bid to make the traitor within that man's clan reveal himself. Daigo in the meanwhile has gone into hiding, and all we know is that he has business to attend to before he'll reveal himself. Also, the fact Daigo already suspected Aoyama of something means he's not the real traitor. While this is true, I don't know how they thread that needle. I may be being an idiot. The point is, things go deeper than Aoyama. Mayumi was sent to keep an eye on us at Daigo's request, to make sure his cover is maintained and he's kept out of the life. Until now, anyway. Madarame regrets this since, well...
あなたに惚れてしまうからです。
She's a spy, but her feelings are genuine, and Kiryu doesn't return them. He probably means well saying it, but...
弱りきっていた俺のそばにこんないい女を置いてくれたこと。
Probably cuts pretty damn deep, especially if you've been doing hostess content. Maybe the only reason Kiryu hasn't spat in Mayumi's face is he worries she'll like it. Jesus, that was fucking mean. Oh, that was a line. Madarame hands Kiryu an official order to dissolve the Yamagasa. He has an idea how the Tojo and Omi will move from here on out, and he doesn't want his boys to get hurt. Kiryu sets off to deliver this order to Yahata, but after the whole incident last night, they're not so willing to talk. It's here we run into the most dangerous foes we've seen yet. Nothing better against heat. The only buggers I broke out the golden gun for on my legend run. At least, out of fear, not impatience. So we come face to face with the captain for a second time, and he rejects the order. It doesn't matter to him whether or not the Yamagasa stands. They're loyal to Madarame and will fight on his behalf.
敵なら今目の前にいるが。
俺もそげんアホやなか。
They've put together that last night was not Kiryu's fault and Aoyama was the real culprit. And man, if word could have spread a little bit faster, you would have far fewer injuries in your ranks. Kiryu, hearing these lads will not back down, tears up the letter and takes control of the situation.
しっかりと仕事をしてもらう。
仕事やって?
Kiryu, in what is the beginning of a strange miniature arc that will last all of half an hour, says he drives a taxi in town, and the Yamagasa falling would be bad for business. So he'll protect them. This upsets Q-Ball, which pleases Kiryu, though he says they'll need more than spirit to win this one.
一発だ。
Kicking off the most hilarious boss fight in the series. Well, it's not a tiger drop, but I'll take it. With their respect won, Kiryu vows to take down every last Tojo in Fukuoka. What happens next is setting up the best shit you'll ever see. Aoyama gets a call. Yahata cockily setting a time and place for a good old-fashioned brawl. He is genuinely unable to comprehend what he's hearing.
これでよかったとや、桐生さん。
Look at this fucker, cool as a cucumber. As for Aoyama, well, this is not the kind of decision he's equipped to weigh up, and that makes him act rash. His pride forces him to take up the challenge.
ここで逃げたら敵の思うつぼだろうが。
So tomorrow night, rumble at the docks. Better known as the docks. Kiryu's got to make amends and deal with any pressing business before the big blowout. Outside, one of Minamida's assistants is asking for testers to try out the brand new IF-8. Oh yeah, other people can wait. It's time for some video games. Kiryu may have just had a scene where he embraced who the world thinks he is more than ever, but nah, he's gonna lie to this kind old man who has expanded his brain in many back alleys. But before we play IF-8, let's talk leveling. Yakuza 5 merges the Soul Orb system with the older categories you put points into, which does make leveling feel more weighted and considered. There is strategizing and delayed gratification, some light maths involved since you get 3 soul orbs per level and many upgrades are multiples of 2. While I like the freedom of 4, I imagine to a newcomer this much choice is stifling when you may not even yet know the intricacies of its combat, while this more limited system can better point you in the right direction. There's a level cap of 20, kinda like D&D, but we start as epic level fighters and ascend from there to godhood. When we finally make it to Kamurocho, Kiryu can find Sasuke working with his granddad, and the elder Komaki reveals the secret of how his age isn't slowing him down. We need a physical breakthrough. A test of endurance so punishing it pushes you past your limits. And now, with his grandson here, he can provide that breakthrough. By breaking you. Yeah, it's the toughest fight in the game. Fortunately, a shotgun is just a ranged tiger drop when you think about it. Hang on, Komaki, what are you doing? Each character can take this test. It raises the level cap and adds some incredibly busted endgame moves. Since you'd had to be late in the game anyway and have gotten each character to what was formerly max level, these moves are wild, and this is a great payoff, really fun. However, you will not have enough orbs through regular leveling to get everything. So now let's talk about Inner Fighter 8, Road Battle. Cool idea, lackluster result. In each city, players can find and play this new iteration, now in the form of a side-scrolling beat-em-up. It's very simplistic and incredibly easy. Enemies slowly saunter in, and character combos when translated into 2D are devastating. There's no attempts to add depth by way of juggling or really any sort of crowd management. The pace is too slow and you're way too fast for it. This feels less like earning an upgrade and more like putting in the time for one. It looks neat, and I respect that something new was attempted, but this winds up cutting away what I liked about Inner Fighter, which was in the way it recontextualized and remixed boss fights for new abilities. This winds up feeling relatively pared down and uninspiring. This will net you a heat gauge boost. Later on, also in Kamurocho, we'll find Minamida working on the main unit. If we've cleared every stage, we can play the Kamurocho level. With investment, each playable fighter also gets a singular flashback battle where they can face off against one of their bosses. Again, for a heat gauge boost. There's no sharing boss fights or character battles, the bosses don't gain new gimmicks, but there are more soul orbs. Once you've got all of those heat gauge upgrades, just grind out the same battle 8 times for those last remaining soul orbs. And if you're doing crafting as well, then keep grinding out battles to get materials. It's cool that it also ties in with Komaki in a way. You've got to put all of your tools and experiences together to truly hit your peak. It is very Yakuza, but this is a step down from 4 in content and is a bit of a bum note after a game of build-up. It's cool that Yakuza 5 has crammed so much gameplay variety in, but many things do wind up feeling like novelties, and Minamida's final creation is sadly a little lacking. Yep, this is the last we'll see of him. This is the video game market. One bad game and funding falls through. Kiryu's been tidying up around town. Literally. Each city has their own version of locker keys, a way to get some bonus items and make sure you're looking at the floor. Nagasugai Taxi joins an initiative to tackle the local littering problem, so we get rewarded for our civic service. While the rewards are lesser than lockers and take more effort, it's a little something to do while you're wandering about town and reflects Kiryu's new role in the community. Okay, let's get on to Mac. He lamented how Kiryu had gone quiet. It really hurt the guy. So Kiryu can provide all of one, count 'em, one new revelation. Sorry, Mac. I guess you can't teach an old dragon new tricks. There is a slight change. Instead of guessing what you should learn, now they need to be readied with a sub-story, setting up a punchline. Which, hey, I like the mechanics which tie into each other like this. Though really, these sub-stories tend to be incredibly simplistic. They're an excuse to get the revelation in place. This is sort of the last game to feature revelations, and it feels like they're running out of steam. Bowing out as well, as gracefully as watching fat people fall off a bridge to learn a new dance move can really be. Hey Haruka, who's that guy? Some sub-stories focus on life at Nagasugai Taxi. One of them even involves Kiyakawa. This is pretty cool. Having him not just exist in the side story but moved into a sub-story feels like a reward unto itself. It makes his role feel a little fuller and like we've actually impacted the world a little. Him and Muramatsu, the fools, well, they drag Kiryu to a mixer where his job is to make the two of them look more appealing than him. Rough gig. Back at the office, we have 3 computer illiterates trying to solve that. A handful of sub-stories get a bit more mileage out of the driving. Just having Kiryu in the workplace is amusing. There's a lot of potential gags and they do hit a few, but having more gameplay styles to lean on expands what can happen. Kiryu's a great character. His stoicism and straightforwardness can work for drama and comedy without him having to really act out of character. But as games go by and his reputation develops, it does feel like there's a bit less he can do. Mundanity can start feeling a little at odds with him. Yakuza 5, through its change of circumstance, can give Kiryu more down-to-earth things to do since only the audience is in on how big he is. The idea of Kiryu just doing a 9-to-5 is funny to begin with. One sub-story even opens up an entirely new minigame. Tatsuya Noodles is a rhythm cooking timing management game. You have to stay on top of several customers' preferred hardness of noodles by managing how long they're cooked. It's an ingenious little mixture of situational awareness and timing that I just can't handle. It's like rubbing your belly and patting your head if you had twice as many heads, hands, and guts. I can stand the heat, but I am not cut out for this kitchen. Each town has one of these little mini-games. They're just there. You don't have to do them. God, how stuffed with content are we already? And it's just somewhere in here. And that makes it so cool. Besides that, a great deal of sub-stories have Kiryu confront aspects of his past. These are effective both for pulling on the heartstrings and giving us a few more clues as to what happened to him. Yakuza 4 had a lot of Kiryu's run-ins be transformative periods in people's lives, where his help over the years was starting to bear fruit. Now Kiryu is in a less fortunate time in his own life, and that's when we bump into Yuya. He creates a bit of a scene, and I feel bad for the guy. He is so hurt by Kiryu trying to blank him in front of a co-worker. When they're alone, Kiryu spells it out. He has to hide his identity for Haruka's sake. The why is left up in the air, but it's a warm display of trust for him to say that much. Yuya himself is in an odd situation. Stardust is running so smoothly that he no longer feels needed, and with that, his motivation for the job is drying up. Seeing Kiryu gives him the idea to uproot his life, take a new name, and start from the bottom. He craves challenge. It's the only way a person can grow. I think I heard that in a game somewhere. And so he winds up as a waiter at a cabaret. Yeah, you're really flipping the script on yourself. With his expertise, he quickly wins hearts and makes a place for himself, until his boss is about to cave to the Yakuza and he can't bring himself to make him do otherwise. Kiryu reminds him what he once fought for, reminding him of who he was 5 games and so many years ago when he spoke English.
Fuck you!
Then we tag team those racketeering rascals and send them running. Yuya tells his boss who he really is and says he has to return to Kamurocho, back where he belongs. Right after starting a fight with the Yakuza. We're seeing a hero off. It's bittersweet, and we'll get some parallels in the main plot shortly. Yuya makes it out a bit better than Kiryu, and considering current circumstances, goddamn, Yuya does sort of rub it in. Not purposefully, and Kiryu doesn't take it that way, but unlike him, he can return to what he wants to protect, no worries. Speaking of parallels, we run into a girl named Haruka protecting a stray pup from some pricks. Kiryu, struck by the coincidence, winds up telling his story to the girl. And she in turn tells hers. Just like Kiryu's Haruka, her dad isn't her biological father. The two had an argument and words were said that neither meant. Now she's ran away and is scared they'll be happier without her. Kiryu then opens up further, now once again fully the man he has to hide. In many of these stories, Kiryu's kindness is very much intact, but filtered through his new identity and somewhat waning patience. Here he gets to express his worldview and in turn reassure Haruka. After collecting her scared and regretful father and sending the Fukuoka fart gang running, the two reunite and Haruka repeats some of his wisdom back to Kiryu, and this hurts. He realizes how far he has strayed from who he wanted to be. This is where he's trapped. It's a really sad, nice little exchange, and honestly one of the best slices of Kiryu's character in Yakuza 5. A reminder that, no, the story hasn't forgotten who he is, he's just not allowed to be that person anymore. And to close off, one weirdly effective little sub-story, at least for me. Kiryu sending anonymous donations to Morning Glory so they can get Christmas presents. He sends differing amounts, hoping the kids will know who gets what amount. He imagines what they'd spend it on. It's simple in execution, you're really just standing at an ATM and inputting numbers over and over again, and it's sweet. And it's very, very sad. It's sort of easy to forget during this segment that this is a Christmas Yakuza just like those first 2 entries, but this one kinda sidelined me and it's heavy. There are many more, both in Kiryu's part and beyond. This is a selection of those I found noteworthy for doing something new, or referring back to the old, and or giving me something to just talk about. We get a bit more insight into how Kiryu sees his new life, him talking with Yuya and Haruka, and when he's by himself sending off gift money. It lets him be himself, more casually, more privately. It lets him be himself, period, if only for a moment. This game has not forgotten who Kiryu is and what he stands for, and we're about to get really deep into that. At Nagasu Taxi, Kiryu comes clean about who he is and what's going on, and tries to quit the company, saying he doesn't want them to come under fire for being associated with him. Yeah, that thing Kiryu said to Yahata, trying to make the taxi thing cool, well, he was coming here to hang it up right afterwards.
申し訳ございません。
許さんね。俺はそげんこと許可できん。
But Nakajima isn't having it. To him, Kiryu is still a good man, so he still has his job, and he better come back safe. And then the sly bugger, spying an advertising opportunity, even lends Kiryu a cab for the task ahead. Nakajima, you're a real boss, you're a real friend, and I'm real sorry for the number of lawsuits. At the docks, the lines once again form, back then for peace and now for war. Behind the troops, Aoyama and Watase watch, the only man telling his Tojo brother he's missing out by not mucking in.
喧嘩は兵隊の仕事です。
And once again, a chairman pulls up. Okay, that's 1 point for the taxi thing.
俺が引き受ける。
4代目。
それは昔の話だ。今は流すタクシーという会社で働くただの運転手だ。
Aoyama steps out to confront Kiryu, and pretty much reveals how out of his element he has always been. Kiryu puts forward a deal, the sickest shit I've ever heard.
その前に一つ聞いておきたい。
なんでしょう。
組同士の戦争にはならねえよな。
あ？
言葉通りの意味だ。俺が一人でお前ら全員倒したら、組同士の争いにはならない。そうだよな。
Cheers for the idea, Morinaga. Aoyama tries to play this off. He thinks the man's insane, that it doesn't work this way anymore. But rank and reality come crashing down.
人をバカにすんのも大概にせえ、ガキが。それじゃ始めや。この喧嘩、立ち会い人はこのわしや。
何をしてるお前ら。4代目だからといって手加減はいらない。行け。
ああ、そうだ。手加減はいらねえ。死にてえやつだけかかってこい。
So, this is the coolest fucking thing. Kiryu facing down an army of Tojo to save Nagasugai, to save the Yamagasa. It's the best. I am fully woken up. The track that plays during this battle, which is also fantastic, is called The Place Where I Used to Be, which is a pretty melancholy name for a song going this hard. This makes Kiryu out to be more force of nature than man. So, while this incredibly hyped fight is happening, let's talk about just how much is going on in this part. I've skimmed over Kiryu's character up until now, so while he's laying into these poor sods, let's dig into him. I didn't much care for his character in 4. I felt it was closer to a caricature. He was the sagely, legendary Yakuza dad, the mythic guardian of the Tojo, wise and arguably merciful. These parts of him are all to some extent true, but that doesn't make up how he acts. While 4 did take him in a weird direction, there is one thing that it got right. Kiryu is the top of the food chain. There is nothing left to really challenge him. How do you top Tower Battle 2010? 5 is incredible for course-correcting Kiryu, and then topping 4 anyway. He fights an entire army. The Tojo isn't even really a boss fight. You're the boss. And that's what's so fascinating right now. Yakuza 5 makes Kiryu a character again. It decided to do something new with him, and that's more than just being a cabbie in a new city. It wanted new insights into his character. So 5 is filled with them. In this part, the central conflict isn't Kiryu versus conspiracy, it's Kiryu versus himself. He exists as 3 people. There's Kazuma Kiryu, the doting owner of Morning Glory, the man he wants to be but cannot return to. There's Taichi Suzuki, the soft-spoken Kyushu cabbie who keeps everyone at arm's length because, well, there's no one really there. That's the man he has to be. Then there's the legend, the 4th chairman, the dragon of Dojima, the protector of the Tojo. This isn't who Kiryu really is. It's the role the world keeps foisting on him without understanding what it's ever really meant to him. People always talk about dreams, but there is just as big an element, a theme that runs through Yakuza 5, and that is identity, and the conflicts people have with who they are versus how people perceive them. Kiryu and the player have built this legend over many games, but it's only a side effect of everything Kiryu and you have done. And when is the last time it's done anything good for him? All it serves to do is drag him into more trouble and threaten those he cares about without fail. In this fight, Kiryu says he's just a cabbie, he's just a civilian, but in doing that, he's taking control of the legend. He tells this chubby, adorably naive Yakuza that yeah, He's here to help the Tojo, just like the legends say he does, but then he shatters that illusion.
ろくに極道の筋も知らないお前らガキが。
Kiryu has always been willing to crush the Tojo when it strays from the path. He has only ever saved the clan for the sake of those he cares about, to grant someone else's wishes or to prevent a greater threat. By the end of each game, Kiryu is fighting for reasons that go beyond just protecting the Tojo itself. In this battle, Kiryu takes on the mantle of 4th chairman to set the record straight, with Watase as witness. Over the course of this part, we see Kiryu reckon with how the world has come to see him, what it wants from him and what he wants from it. We're even made to confront a side of him we know to be wrong. Stripped of everyone he cares about, who is Kiryu? Well, he's still a good man, one who never lets go of what he sees as right. But his patience has worn thin, his kindness is more reserved. He's weary of the Yakuza world, but at the same time, it's the only arena left in which he thrives. We see his pre-Morning Glory self, who was more irritable and brutish, start coming to the surface. And that's just another layer of why this fight is so fucking cool. There's so much going on under the hood. And I mean, it's cool as shit on the surface of it. An amazing spectacle. The remaster cuts the subtitle here. Besides being fucking raw, yeah, that about sums up what's going on here. The Tojo have prided themselves on this man's strength, on the idea that he will be there for them, without understanding what that strength meant. But right now, he is there. For them. And yeah, that's why I love parts of Yakuza 5. So everyone is blown the fuck out, and that rat fuck Aoyama thinks he can simply not hold up his end of the deal. Aoyama makes a good villainous counterpart. While everyone fails to understand Kiryu, Aoyama fails to understand much of anything. His arrogance and business savvy let him trick himself into thinking he's invincible, too prideful and cocky to realize that he is being outplayed at every step and severely miscalculating his moves. Daigo spotted his trap. He thought he was calling Yahata's bluff, and he brought Watase here thinking that an oath of brotherhood meant he would blindly be at his beck and call. Aoyama doesn't understand the Yakuza, much less Watase, and now this lack of respect has turned on him. He may have prospered in times of peace, but he was not cut out for war. And so, as Kiryu beats him to a pulp, Aoyama turns into a snivelling wreck, and brings that misunderstanding to the fore.
4代目は人は殺さない情けのある男だって。
そんなに優しい人間じゃねえ。どんなに素性を隠して生きていてもな、中身は自分でもヘドが出るくらいのヤクザもんだ、俺は。
There's a lot to unpack there. Kiryu is forgiving, but has he ever truly been merciful? He beats people who have it coming, and pretty badly at that. He's never been outright opposed to killing. He's been in plenty of situations where others have killed on his behalf, and he's never gotten on their case about it. There's a lot more to this next game, we'll come back around to it. Watase dragged the crying Aoyama up off the floor, yelling at him to shape up, and the blubbering mess spills something interesting.
俺は言われただけなんだ。4代目、桐生さんを引っ張り出せばそれでいいって。
Then spills some more.
それはあんたの兄弟。
Morinaga appears, and in a moment, I am really confused.
最初から大悟を裏切っていたのか。
裏切りですか。けなげに働く舎弟を見捨てて一人逃げ出した会長も俺には十分裏切り者に見えますがね。
The reveal that Morinaga and Aoyama were in cahoots until he spilled just then is great. Really recontextualizes Morinaga as trying to raid the Yamagasa base loaded down with squibs and terrified of just bursting blood everywhere at a moment's notice. Kiryu realizes someone is missing. He questions where Aizawa is, and we're told he's been disposed of.
犬吠山の山中に埋葬してきました。
Furious, Kiryu tries to rush him down, and in a panic, Morinaga puts one in his leg. Whatever's going on, Kiryu isn't allowed to die just yet. He's told that if he wants answers, he'll find them in Tokyo, and Morinaga sets off. 2 days later, Kiryu's back at work, and Serizawa comes to check in. Watase stopped by the morgue to light some incense for his brother before heading back to Kansai, saying he'll handle things on Miyomi's side, but expects Kiryu to go settle things in Tokyo, and he's not planning on going.
行きたい場所があるんだったら乗せてってやる。だがそれ以外、あんたの指図は受けない。
Kiryu, the taxi thing was cool once, but you can't make this cool cabbie thing work without drifts. Anyway, Serizawa tells him to check the news.
繰り返します。昨日未明、札幌市内で発生した発砲殺人事件に関して、北海道警察は今朝、被害者を関東一円を拠点とする広域指定暴力団、東上会の幹部組員、真島五郎氏であると断定。緊急の会見を開き、発表しました。関東最大の暴力団組織、東上会の現役幹部組員であった真島五郎氏の死亡という事態を重く見た同警察は警視庁と連携し、事態の全容解明に努める方針を明らかにしました。以上、ニュースでした。さあ、続いては林田さんのお天気コーナーです。林田さん。
Yakuza 5 is big. That is 1/5 of the game. We have covered so much ground and there is still so much more to go. It's a strong first impression. The politics are intriguing, Kiryu is fascinating, Daigo's finally pulling his weight. There's a bit of a slump in the middle, but it's all building to an explosive payoff. Kiryu, after being too much last game, is wonderfully re-examined here, starting distant and cold but slowly reintroducing himself in a new light, one that still makes sense to his character and advances his relationship with the Tojo. Plus, there is a simple joy to being the big deal in a new town where no one knows you, so they all get their worlds rocked. It's a trope that I never tire of. The wealth of content we're hit with does slow the story down a little, but for the most part it's cleverly kept to the side. You're never reaching for something to do, but by that same token, it never feels overwhelming. So the game makes a fantastic first impression. Let's see how the next part fares. So hello everyone, that was part 1 of 5 of this Yakuza retrospective essay analysis playthrough thing, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you're worried that I haven't mentioned certain features or themes, please know that I'm divvying out elements of the game, pacing them, trying to pace the parts, and make sure they all have a meatiness to them. For those who are wondering where I've been, well, the answer is right here. I didn't disappear or anything. If I have to ever go away for a period or forever, people will know ahead of time. It's just that this video took ages. But as of now, it's all written, all narrated, it just needs video editing. And I hope to have at least a part out a month. Work at it at a steady clip so that it will let me hammer out some other smaller videos, so this isn't just the year of Yakuza 5. I have some stuff on my plate that I'm really excited to delve into, and now that I just have to edit Yakuza 5 and not think about it too much, it's a big weight off my shoulders. If you're a patron of mine, you're not getting charged per part. Only when the whole series is done, since I'd feel dodgy charging 5 times for what is essentially one project. If you want to chip in a few quid, I do have a Ko-Fi, so that's there. And I hope to have some interesting other projects up alongside this video soonish.